All right. Here we go. Let's do this. Hey, everybody. This is Michael Julian from One Vlog Podcast. Thanks for tuning into One and checking out this segment in terms of my music podcast here on my channel One. And the vlog and the podcast is an offering to the global community as a one community to pull us all together right now in such a trying, amazingly ever-changing time around the globe to inspire us and to unite us, connect us, and provide us with information that will improve better mental, physical, and spiritual well-being based on focusing on mind, body, spirit, and abundance. One's also a platform that I created in terms of connecting people from diverse cultures and communities around the globe so that we can all share our stories, provide content, do interviews and information that can better serve our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, but also provide us an introspective to our connection as human beings. And it is an offshoot of a project that I was doing in the past called Live It Stoked, which was all about overcoming your challenges and obstacles in life after I myself had gone through some pretty challenging obstacles and challenges. So I'm absolutely stoked that you're tuning in right now. I welcome you to participate with us at One, and would really appreciate if you subscribe to the channel in the event that you dig what I'm doing here in terms of content. But in this episode, we're doing music. So I'm coming at you live here right now in this particular moment on May 6th. It is a Saturday night here in Playa Hermosa, Costa Rica. That's where I'm broadcasting from. As life has taken such a strange and trippy turn, been here for 3.5 years through the COVID experience and been through some pretty heavy obstacles once again, and decided to redon my Project One that I started right around that time. Did some interviews with some amazing people in the beginning, and then kind of went dormant for a while. So we're back up and running, and I'm really excited to bring it to you. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about memories that I have, which are very important to me right now. You know, I mean, the older I get, the more I understand the importance of the beauty of our memories and experience in life, things that we actually did love and enjoy. And right now, with the planet being so trippy in terms of what's going on with world government and the economy and the coming of conflict, I figured, hey, you know, I need to actually do some catharsis. So that's really what this is about. These are memories of mine and things that I hope, you know, anybody out there listening to the podcast might find, I don't know, interesting. But it's basically just on the topic of music. And in this podcast episode, I want to talk about what it was like to be a kid in the 70's and what music was like. You know, music as a 70's kid. And I'm really, I don't know what it is. Like lately, I've just been, in my REM sleep, I've been waking up, you know, and all of a sudden having these really vivid images of my childhood and my past, which is really cool. I mean, that's an awakening moment, obviously, for mind. And just remembering and just appreciating and just having gratitude for what it was like back then to be a kid in the 70's, and enjoying the explosion of the best music that we'd ever heard, that the world's ever heard. I mean, it's unprecedented, right? Between the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, 30s and 40s and 50s literally produced rock and roll. And I was born in 1967, so I missed the cool shit that I wanted to be a part of. You know, whenever I look back into the, you know, when I was a child, I looked back, you know, looking at video and TV and, you know, anything that was going on back then in terms of like the 60s. man, did I wish I had been born, 10, 20 years before I was born, based on the fact that I found it the most amazing time in terms of global society, art, but especially music. So that's where my head's been at, and I needed to ramble blamble about it, so here it is. That's what I'm doing. Right now, being in Costa Rica has been a challenge in the last 3 years based on doing some music here and enjoying it for a time, but as the world's been changing and we've been going through immeasurable challenges here as well, it's kind of fallen by the wayside. So I just need to get back to my roots. That's what's going on. Trying to rejuvenate spirit in terms of being a musician for a long, long time. Wow. Can't even believe it, man. How fast time flies. I've been a musician now for, almost 30 years, 29 years. And, so that's what we're going to talk about on the podcast here is music in the 70s. And, when I was a kid, I lived in Tucson, Arizona. And back then, out on the east side of Tucson, it was a magical time. It was a strange time. It was beautiful in so many ways, and in my memories, I miss it. I'm the son of two public school teachers from Tucson, Arizona. Was an athlete, and when I was young, was a skateboarder and raced, bicycle motocross and played tennis and played soccer for many years and was into all kinds of, activities in terms of sport. But looking back now in terms of my memories, when I think about what it was that really, truly, powered my soul, my spirit, it was music. It was always music, and it was music from a very, very young age. 5 years old, and I had those memories where, my father was an English teacher, and he was also a veteran and was a commander in Vietnam. So my experience as a kid was an interesting one. Based on the fact that, upon conception, I was kind of born into the military in some strange fashion, just based on who my dad was. But, he really was a magical influence on me in so many ways, based on the fact that he had a love for music. And at that time in the 70s, it was one of the only ways for me to actually communicate or connect with my dad. It was the one time where there wasn't that static where we were strangers, which happened for so many sons. This is the history of being a son and or a father, for that matter. Depending on your time frame and your background and how you go about communicative energy or love or lack thereof at the time. But music was the connector, and being it that he was in Vietnam, of course, he was listening to the best music that had ever been created, and of course here I am, 5 years old, and I'm in Tucson, Arizona, in his home, as listening to everything that was epic at the time, on headphones through an amazing sound system. Based on him being a commander in Vietnam, it was incredible because, of course, he came home with, just an epic sound system. Back then, of course, you could get electronics for such a cheap rate, and he brought back, from the experience of being in Asia, this badass Kenwood system. And he was a lover of rock and roll and jazz and many, many different forms of music, classical music, as his mother's father, my Nana Mary, her dad, I was a composer arranger for the New York City Symphony, and so classical music was a huge component. So all of that music is happening in my house, and of course I'm 5 years old, and I'm just, any music at that given time, was glory for me. It was epiphany for me. It was awakening for me in terms of any sound waves hitting my ears. I mean, there are pictures of me that I really wish I had right now in terms of this span of time in my life. But there were pictures that my parents took of me, at 5 years old, singing into a wooden spoon with headphones on that are bigger than, the sides of my head. I'd have to hold the headphones on with my hands so that the headphones wouldn't just slip down around my body because I was so little. But, just loving it. He'd put on a piece of vinyl. He'd be like, "Hey man, listen to this." And I'd go for it. I'd put the headphones on. I'd just immediately be into it and loving it. So beautiful, beautiful memories back then. And, I don't know. It just, that time frame was for me, and I think for hundreds of millions of people around the globe. It kind of doesn't matter if you're an American or not. I mean, you go back into the history of art, music being an art form. Really what was the most explosive period of time, the most magical period of time in terms of music, what we were exposed to, what we could buy, the old original invention of music, vinyl, just how beautiful it was to actually open up a brand new record, to split the plastic or the fane off of that album cover, look at the artwork that was included on it, the smell of a record, the smell of the sleeve, the paper itself. All of those things are just magical, magical moments and memories for me. And so I was just digging it, and I just wanted to talk about that here in this podcast. I'm really feeling like right now, the world is in a strange state of affairs in terms of how we're communicating globally, and about, just in terms of time frame, kind of forgetting what was important or really, beautiful about the past in terms of time. Everything's moving so rapidly, and all we're doing is interacting with our phones and our devices and, doing digital technology, and the advent of all this amazingly shitty, ridiculous noise that people are trying to call music out there right now. I mean, I don't mean to take a negative turn here, but we need to address the realities of what has happened. Should we not? In terms of the digital invention and technology taking over music, which is really spooky. So, I just want to promote the idea that, it still exists. Beautiful, beautiful music exists. It just sucks that we have to reach into these digital formats and platforms to actually experience it and love it, to try to love it when we can't really enjoy the old school way in which to do it, which for me, absolute magic to unsheath a piece of vinyl and set a needle down, because of course that sound coming out of real speakers with real wires, we're not talking about any Bluetooth mechanisms or technology in play, that sound cannot be delivered in any other way, and that was the beauty of it. The bummer about digital technology was that it literally did away with that, how it affects our souls and how it comes across, how it makes you feel in terms of analog. But yeah, man, I mean, just needed to ramble blamble here a little more about just experiences of it, I mean, being in Tucson, Arizona was a magical time based on the fact that there was so much amazing music. We were in the past. We were, in my house, we were listening to music from the 20s, 30s, and 40s and 50s. And, I was a 70s kid, so everything was hitting Tucson radio in such a massive scale kind of way. And it was a rad time because almost every single FM station was playing the best music, And at that time, I mean, bands of the 70s, I'm going to say them really fast here, but think about the power in this, You're in a time frame of 5 years old to, 10 years old, and everything that I'm going to list was on the radio. Okay, here we go. Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, The Eagles, Queen, ZZ Top, Genesis, Rush, the Doobie Brothers. Oh man, do I love the Doobie Brothers. Unbelievable. Kansas, yes. And of course, even in 70s radio, we're backpedaling because the Beatles were constantly on the radio regardless. Beautiful. Still are completely and totally a priority for me in terms of listening to music. If you guys are feeling down right now about what's going on in the world or how you're feeling, the changes, what's going to happen in the future, man, play like 2 Beatles records in a row and watch what happens to your mind, your soul, and your blood flow. Guaranteed you're not going to feel worse. All right, here we go. We're still on the list. Blue Oyster Cult, Roxy Music, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, The Clash. Oh man, do I remember the first time I bought my first Clash record? It was epic, right? And it immediately led to me buying London Calling. And, it was like war in my house. My dad would be like, look, man, we got to set some rules. You can only play that like maybe a couple times a week. I mean, every day, Michael. But I was all about it, Pink Floyd. How Pink Floyd just blew my mind and my head wide open as a child. Magical. Aerosmith, man, crazy in my lifetime. I loved Aerosmith so much as a kid. I bought all the records and dug them. And kind of funny, later on in life, I was a composite engineer for Parker Guitars and ended up making the first, 2018 instruments as a composite engineer, Parker Fly, and ended up actually interacting with Aerosmith as they bought a couple of flies. Joe Perry was interested in checking out the guitars in terms of Ken Parker's work, and kind of trippy. I don't know, a little sidebar there. Fleetwood Mac. Oh my God, one of the best bands the world has ever heard, period. I mean, Fleetwood Mac, for me, they rank in the top 5 of all best bands. The Allman Brothers Band, the Grateful Dead was on the radio. I was buying Grateful Dead records later on and just absolutely in heaven. That transcended into another time frame. I was actually in the military, was in the Army for a time, and about a 4-year stint. And during that time, it was so funny. I was in such rebellion in terms of hoping that my time would end in terms of my service commitment. I was loving the Grateful Dead because I was listening to Dead records as a kid, and here I am in Colorado Springs, about to get out of the Army and hoping I'm not going to get recalled as Desert Storm was going on, and loving the Dead and watching a band called Shakedown Street, making friends with them in Manitou Springs, Ted and the boys. So Grateful Dead, love the Dead. Kiss, loved Kiss. Kiss was a huge part of my childhood as a 70s kid. All the posters, all the promo, all the records, and 3 shows at TCC Arena in Tucson, Arizona. That was epic. Listening to Chicago records. My dad loved Chicago, and to this day that music is highly moving. And, then there's a segue of things that aren't just, conventional or classic rock and roll. I mean, Blondie, it was 1974. And I remember buying those records, and I was just so hungry for music. I had this hunger for digging every single artist that was on vinyl. Vinyl was the magic pill, So, I had Joan Jett records. I had Blondie records. Of course, I had all of the Linda Ronstadt records. Linda Ronstadt and her family are from Tucson. Well, they're actually from Mexico, but they're from Tucson, Arizona. And ironically enough, her dad was a patient of my grandfather. So there was some connection there. And, as a young boy, in the 70's, Linda was one of the most beautiful, hottest artists in the industry. So for me, did I have a Linda Ronstadt poster in my bedroom on the wall? Yeah. What's the reason? Do I love the records? Yeah. I was like, I'd listen to Blue by You over and over and over again, but it was basically because I had fallen in love with her. Here I am like 13, 14, and I'm smitten. Just like, oh, she's so beautiful. So anyway, memories like that. Bands like Electric Light Orchestra, ELO. Now, that stuff, Jeff Lynne, genius, absolute epic genius. And of course, later on in life, how magical that became for me in terms of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. It was Tom's way of just connecting with the best of the best. George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison, Jeff Lynne. Insane in terms of Traveling Wilburys. So, but I remember the first moment I bought an ELO record. Again, absolute, mind-blowing, totally, completely addicted to this music, and then ended up seeing them as a child as well, which is just epic. And then, there was the intervention of punk and weird things that were happening and modern bands. we were huge fans of Van Halen and bands like Rush and King Crimson and, AC/DC and Journey. Journey was my very first show. I'm going to do another podcast about that, actually. Talk about my very first show and how that kicked everything off. But I was listening to it all, man. The Ramones, Styx, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, of course, because some of the most beautiful, some of the most epic tunes for me in terms of your mind and your soul, in terms of the magic that was going on in the hills, in California. That's really who I am in the marrow of my bones. Crosby, Stills, and Nash to this day, it's a daily listen. Bad Company, Paul Rodgers and Bad Company. These are songs that I sing as covers and did in my band, Hypnotic Eye, which I had here in Costa Rica. Named the band after the last record that Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers recorded before Tom's passing. Man. And I think about him every day. And I think about every single member of the Heartbreakers every day. And I think about Dana, his wife, every day. Every day. Just based on Tom leaving us and leaving this world. He was such an amazing, amazing person. And I remember his influence on me was, it's hard to put into words. As a 70's kid, we had MTV. The invention of MTV. I remember watching MTV for the very first airing of it on television in my house in Tucson, Arizona. And of course, who's on? Well, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. It was that weird time of MTV where music was going through such strange changes, and of course, the MTV organization was trying to find a way to capture people's attention with world news, which I thought was really cool. It's kind of what I'm doing on One World here with One, and then marrying it with, what was popular at the time. And of course, there's the Petty video, and I'm in front of it alone in the family room of my house in like a hot summer afternoon in Arizona, and I'm just mesmerized and immediately just wanting to buy every single Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers record, which has been a huge influence on my life, my spiritual life, my soul, and I will play Tom songs until my time has come. I don't know what else we got. I used to buy Boston records. The Stooges came out in '67, Iggy Pop. But of course, Iggy's career has been epic, and he was present every single year. And I happen to gravitate toward, anything that was interesting, anything that was provocative, anything that was hardcore. And I love the Stooges. The Kinks, Simon and Garfunkel. The Bee Gees were huge. I mean, they started in '58 and they went all the way to 2012 before things started to fall apart. So, we were listening to everything. I was listening to it all as a 70s kid. And then on the other side of things, based on trips that I used to make, going to California. We used to go to California almost every summer, every other summer. My parents were public school teachers, as I mentioned, and they used to save up their dimes to take us kids, out of the desert, out of Tucson, across the desert, and go into California to either visit San Diego, or we used to go in to visit my dad's brother in Manhattan Beach in the late 70s or mid 70s. And, it's kind of what people from Arizona do. That's why in California they call us Zonies. That's our nickname. It's all the people from Arizona that want to dump out of the heat to get the ocean. So we'd all, trek it across the desert through Yuma and San Bernardino County and eventually hit, San Diego. And during that time, spending time in Manhattan Beach Park, of course, in the 70s, it was an epic time because the drought had hit, and here are all these cool things that I'm just absolutely entranced with. Surfing and skateboarding and Californian culture, and the link to the things that were really moving me as a 70s kid in terms of music, like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Joni Mitchell, anybody who lived in the canyon, in Laurel Canyon. And there's just kind of a sidebar for anybody who has not seen Echo in the Canyon, which is Bob Dylan's son's project. It's a amazing documentary that's on Netflix, and out there on platforms you can check it out. But Jacob's project's awesome because he tells the story of all the beautiful epic bands that were social community and all lived in the same area together, basically, in Laurel Canyon. And the beauty of the project, obviously, is that he was paying, by and large, huge tribute to Tom Petty, because it was that time frame where I think everybody knew that Tom's time was already limited. So it's super special, and I promote that. Go check out Echo in the Canyon. This is just kind of a sidebar. But, it was absolutely epic time. Getting exposed to bands like T-Rex, Mark Boland, unbelievable. To me, one of the most magical poets, writers, rock stars that the world will ever see. He's up there with Queen, Freddie Mercury of Queen, or, Led Zeppelin for me. It just was, Boland is rad, and it's so funny, like all this time I've been doing cover music and playing with my band here in Costa Rica, or whether I was in the States. I love playing T-Rex songs, and every time I do, it's wild. I mean, people who have never ever heard Mark Bolan or T-Rex, they immediately dig it. They just come unglued, which is really fun. And that's why I play them. Of course, for anybody who does know Mark Bolan and T-Rex, of course, they're completely stoked because it's not something, people do normally if they're playing covers in a band. I don't know. In terms of playing covers, it was kind of a forced thing. I had to do it here based on that's what people want here, as Costa Rica is a tourist destination. So, you got to kind of learn to throw your original music, slide your original music in there and your sets in there as best you can, but you got to play things that people actually really know, That's the trick. But I have to admit, as it lasted, it was a lot of fun. We had a grand time in terms of playing some music here for a time. COVID really, really put the change on that, and so it's been a little more than challenging in terms of trying to regroup and understand where I'm taking music these days. But this is the music that shaped me, and it was because I was a 70's kid listening to the best music that the world has ever seen. And really cool too. I mean, in terms of spending that time in California at that time, there was all this other music that was happening in the 70's that I was listening to because I was there that didn't really exist. I mean, people were listening to a lot of classical rock and roll and things from the past in terms of Tucson radio at the time, but we hit a little late in terms of things that became popular very, very quickly in terms of roots reggae and punk. And you wouldn't hear punk on the radio, that's for sure, but just in terms of being able to get records, and it was based on me being in Manhattan Beach Park, Manhattan Beach, California, which was Dogtown, and that was the time that was epic for me as a kid because I was so interested in surfing and skating and the things that were California, and the music that was spilling out onto the street out of people's homes back then was absolutely epic and magical for me. I mean, in terms of skateboarding, my interest was peaked because my cousins lived right there, and of course at the time, Z-Boys and the birth of Dogtown in terms of, who they all were as skateboarders, the first inventors of skateboarding, Tony Alva, Stacy Peralta, Wenzel Adams, Shogo Kubo, Peggy Aoki, Wenzel Adams, Dave Muir, the Skip, Egblom, the dawn of Dogtown, was happening. So being a kid and being athletic and being physical and the music hitting at the same time in California was an epic time. And ironically enough, it led to me actually reconnecting with Tony Alva and eventually Steve Van Dorn of Vans in terms of my project Live It Stoked after I had shattered my neck and gone through my surgeries and was trying to do a project to promote positive thinking and overcoming challenges and obstacles in your life. But the point I'm trying to make here is the 70's and being a kid and the music that was coming, because during that time we were also listening to roots reggae and punk and ska, and I'd come home with these lists from California, and I'd go to my favorite record store and I'd be searching through the bins, and of course it's now hitting Tucson and Arizona, and I'm grabbing Bob Marley records and Black Uhuru records and Peter Tosh records and ska records, the Specials, and English beat records, and stuff that kids just hadn't heard in terms of my neighborhood. And I was turning my friends on to it, and I'd be like, hey man, do you know what mod music is? You ever heard the Specials? And I'd throw it on my turntable and blow one of my friends' minds. It'd be like, whoa man, what is that? That is so danceable, that's so cool, because it just wasn't being heard in Tucson. So it was an absolutely magical time. And it really is wonderful to enjoy and have gratitude and appreciate these memories, because all of that music and that particular time frame molded me and shaped me as a musician and helped me learn how to be a musician. It taught me so much about listening to music purely for the enjoyment, just to do it. And I think it's really an amazing thing that happened on this planet. And I just wanted to ramble blamble about it. I wanted to talk about it. It's been deep in my bones and it's been on my mind, and that's pretty much what the podcast was about. So there you have it. I just wanted to send light, love, and energy to every single person who could be tuning in to listening to this podcast in terms of music. What it was like to be a kid in the 70s and the explosion of all these beautiful, amazing, powerful, energetic, and inspirational bands. And I hope that you enjoyed the episode here. I'm gonna keep it short here and wrap it up. But I'm sending light and love to every single person who's been listening. And if you have enjoyed the podcast and you'd like to hear more content, please subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. It's going to help me grow the one community out there to provide us positive, mind-cleansing content out there right now, as we need it, and mental health is of major importance in terms of the pressures and constraints and things that we are all going through in terms of change in the world right now. And new podcasts, new interviews, and videos will be coming out soon. So make sure you subscribe. I also have a page on Facebook in terms of social media, so you can check it out there as well. And if for any reason you want to reach out or have any comments, please feel free to shoot your comments in the comments section below. I hope that everybody out there, no matter what time zone you're in, that you have a beautiful morning, day, afternoon, or evening. I hope that you tune in again. And until next time, I'm Michael Julian. Stay safe out there. We are one.